What if the person you loved the most from your past suddenly appeared before you, but in a way you never imagined? A millionaire walks past a beggar with 2 children, then realizes she's someone he once knew. What happens next will leave you speechless. Before we dive into this emotional journey, let us know in the comments, where are you watching this from? We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. David Callahan stepped out of his sleek black limousine, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement of the bustling city sidewalk. The towering skyscrapers around him reflected his success, the success he had fought tooth and nail for. A self-made millionaire, David was the embodiment of power and prestige, yet inside there was an emptiness he couldn't quite place. His days were filled with back-to-back meetings, boardroom discussions, and investment deals worth millions. But today felt different. As he walked towards his favorite downtown cafe, sipping his overpriced espresso, his eyes scanned the streets absent-mindedly until they landed on a figure huddled near the corner of an old building. There she was. At first, he thought his mind was playing tricks on him. A woman, wrapped in tattered layers of clothing, sitting on a cardboard mat, her arms wrapped tightly around 2 small children. Her hair was matted, her face weary, and her eyes, those eyes, were unmistakable. Sarah. His heart clenched, a surge of emotions hitting him like a freight train. Sarah Jennings, the girl he had once loved so deeply in his youth. The girl with a heart of gold and dreams as big as the sky. What was she doing here? Like this? David stood frozen in disbelief, memories rushing back like a tidal wave. He remembered their late-night talks about the future, their shared laughter under the autumn leaves, and her unwavering belief in him when no one else did. She had been his anchor during his darkest times, and now she was here, destitute, broken, and clinging to 2 fragile little souls. His feet moved on their own, carrying him toward her. As he approached, Sarah looked up, her eyes locking onto his. A flicker of recognition crossed her face, followed by something else. Shame, fear, and an overwhelming sadness that pierced straight through him. David? Her voice was barely above a whisper, cracked and fragile. He crouched down to her level, ignoring the judgmental stares of passers-by. Sarah. What happened? Tears welled up in her eyes as she instinctively pulled her children closer. A little boy, no older than 6, peeked up at him with wide, innocent eyes, while a younger girl buried her face in her mother's worn coat. It's a long story, she said, her voice trembling. Life. It didn't turn out the way I thought it would. David swallowed the lump in his throat. Where is your husband? He asked gently. Sarah lowered her gaze, her fingers trembling as they ran through her son's tangled hair. He left, a year ago. He couldn't handle it when things got tough. We lost our home, our savings, everything. I tried, David. I really did. A single tear slipped down her cheek. But no one wants to hire a mother with 2 kids and nowhere to go. David felt his chest tighten with emotions he hadn't felt in years. Anger, guilt, and an overwhelming desire to fix everything for her. He glanced at her children, their small faces etched with exhaustion and hunger. The thought of Sarah, once so full of life and ambition, reduced to begging on the streets, was almost too much to bear. I'm so sorry, Sarah, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I should have kept in touch. I should have... She shook her head weakly. Don't. There's nothing you could have done. Life just happens. But David knew better. He wasn't going to let this be the end of her story. Taking a deep breath, he reached for his wallet and handed her a bundle of cash. This won't fix everything, but it's a start. Let me help you, Sarah. Please. Sarah hesitated, her pride warring with desperation. She looked down at the money, then up at him, tears spilling freely now. "David, I can't take this." He squeezed her hand gently. "You can, and you will. You once believed in me when no one else did. Now let me do the same for you." Her lips trembled, and for the first time in a long time, hope flickered in her eyes. But David knew this was just the beginning. He wasn't just going to give her money, he was going to give her a second chance at life. Sarah sat in the back seat of David's luxurious car, her children nestled against her sides, their small bodies trembling from the cold they had grown too accustomed to. The leather seats, the warmth, the faint scent of expensive cologne, it all felt surreal. Her fingers clutched the edges of the blanket David had handed her moments ago, disbelief still clouding her thoughts. "Are you warm enough?" David asked softly from the front seat, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. Sarah nodded, her voice failing her. It had been so long since someone had cared, since someone had even asked. David's driver maneuvered through the city streets in silence, the hum of the car filling the quiet space between them. He couldn't stop glancing at Sarah and her children. How had life been so cruel to someone who once shined so brightly? He clenched his fists, guilt gnawing at him. Where had he been when she needed help the most? A few minutes later, they pulled up to a high-rise building overlooking the city skyline. Sarah's eyes widened in awe as she stared out the window. "David, where are we?" she whispered. "My place," he said simply, stepping out and opening the door for her. "You'll stay here for now, until we figure things out." Sarah hesitated, looking down at her children. "David, I can't. This is too much. He gently interrupted, his eyes sincere. "Sarah, it's not charity. It's a friend helping another friend." Tears welled up in her eyes as she took a deep breath and finally nodded, stepping out of the car with her children. Inside the penthouse, the contrast to the life she had been living hit Sarah like a wave. The plush furniture, the enormous windows letting in the city lights, the warmth that wrapped around her like an embrace. She hadn't known such comfort in years. "Mommy, look," her little boy Jack exclaimed, pointing at the massive television. Her daughter Lily stared in awe at the warm fireplace, her tiny fingers reaching out cautiously. David watched quietly as Sarah absorbed her surroundings. "I'll have some clothes and food brought up," he said gently, "and tomorrow we'll talk about next steps." Sarah swallowed hard, emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "David, why are you doing all this?" He smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Because I owe you more than you know, Sarah. When I had nothing, you believed in me. You gave me hope when I was ready to give up on myself. It's my turn now." Sarah wiped a tear from her cheek, her voice breaking. "But I don't deserve this. I failed, David. I failed my kids. I failed myself." David knelt before her, taking her trembling hands in his. "No, Sarah, you didn't fail. Life can be cruel, but that doesn't mean you're defeated. You're still standing, and now you're not alone." Sarah let out a quiet sob, feeling the weight of years of struggle begin to lift, even if just a little. For the first time in a long time, a glimmer of hope sparked in her chest. The following days were a whirlwind. David had arranged everything: new clothes, medical checkups for the kids, even enrollment in a nearby school. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah watched her children smile, laugh, and sleep peacefully in a bed without fear. One evening, as Sarah sat by the window staring at the city lights, David walked in with a folder in hand. "I have something for you," he said, handing it to her. She opened it hesitantly, her eyes widening in disbelief. Inside were job applications, educational programs, and a handwritten note from David. "I believe in you. Let's rebuild your dreams together." Sarah looked up at him, tears spilling down her face. "David, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," he said with a warm smile. "Just promise me one thing." "What?" "That you'll never give up on yourself again." Sarah nodded, clutching the papers to her chest. "I promise." David watched her with pride. He knew the journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but tonight he had given her something priceless: hope. And sometimes, hope was all someone needed to rewrite their story. Weeks passed, and Sarah slowly began to rebuild her life, piece by piece. Each morning, she woke up in a warm bed, no longer afraid of what the day might bring. Her children, Jack and Lily, thrived in their new school, their laughter filling the once quiet apartment. And with David's encouragement, Sarah took a leap of faith. She enrolled in an online course to revive her dream of becoming a healthcare worker. Late one evening, she sat at the kitchen table, textbooks sprawled out before her, her fingers gripping a pencil as she scribbled notes furiously. David stood in the doorway, watching with a proud smile. "You're really doing it," he said softly. Sarah looked up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I never thought I'd get another chance," she admitted. "But you believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." David pulled out a chair and sat beside her. "You always had it in you, Sarah. Life just has a way of throwing us off course. But look at you now, you're stronger than ever." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, but this time they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of hope, of resilience. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you, David." "You already have," he said with a gentle smile. "By fighting, by not giving up." A few months later, Sarah landed a job at a local clinic, working as a healthcare assistant. With David's support, she found a small apartment of her own, a place where she and her children could start fresh, truly on their own terms. Standing in the doorway of her new home, Sarah looked at David, emotions swirling inside her. "I never thought I'd get here," she whispered. "You saved me, David." He shook his head. "No, Sarah, you saved yourself. I just gave you a little push." They stood there for a moment, both knowing how much had changed in such a short time. Then Jack and Lily came running, wrapping their arms around David's legs. "Thank you, Mr. David," they squealed, their eyes shining with pure happiness. David crouched down, ruffling their hair. "You two take care of your mom, all right? She's pretty amazing." Sarah wiped a tear from her cheek, smiling. "More than you know." As David stepped back, he took one last look at Sarah, standing tall, confident, and full of hope. "Remember," he said, "this isn't the end of your story, it's just the beginning." Sarah nodded, determination burning in her eyes. "And I'm ready for whatever comes next." Sarah's story is proof that life can break you, but with the right support and determination, you can rise again. No matter how dark your days may seem, there's always hope. You just have to take that first step. If this story inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel to hear more stories of resilience, hope, and second chances. Together, we can spread hope and inspire the world, one story at a time. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change a life. Thank you for watching, and remember, never give up.